They posted a notice in the hall. Applications open for the Royal Guard, direct command of Archduke Curtis Schenberg. Everyone around thought it was pretty dumb to put up a notice for the Navy here, of all places. Rumor had it that the hero, Curtis Schenberg, was dangerous because of his awful temper and explosive personality. And then this one seriously brave girl decided to take on the challenge and sign up to serve under Duke Curtis. Her name was Chloe, and even her friends trying to talk her out of it couldn't stop her. She was dead set on it. She figured the only reason they posted the notice here was because everyone else had turned down the job. It mentioned a quarterly bonus of 200% right off the bat if you got the position. And for Chloe, that was more than enough to keep her family fed for a whole season. Considering she was dirt poor, this job meant she wouldn't have to worry about starving or freezing for the first 3 months. Wars and risks aside, a year would be enough, and maybe the Archduke wouldn't be too much of a hard-ass. Nothing scared her, nothing held her back. All that mattered was keeping her family fed and warm. But now, Lieutenant Chloe Abvance had to obey Archduke's orders without question. It all felt so harsh. Now she was convinced the Archduke really was hard on her. Curtis's favorite thing was roll call, and she, like everyone else, was ordered to keep her head down. Nobody lasted 2 months working for that insane 110% main character, Curtis, and you don't even need to say why when you're under the command of a moron like that. Roll call is just what it says on paper. In reality, it's a disciplinary measure. Chloe was finding it hard to take this treatment, especially after working late and being so exhausted. Furious, she wrote down how much she hated him, and even the adjutant had to carry out these ridiculous orders. But then, remembering Scherberg was the hero she served, she quickly threw the papers away. The Archduke was obsessed with his work, always burning the midnight oil, and his aides had to keep up. If you nodded off on his shift, you were guaranteed a disciplinary action. Lost in thought about how to get rid of these papers, Chloe even considered eating them. The girl pushed away thoughts of punishment. After all, she was getting paid big bucks and she'd already been there for 3 months. There were days she felt like becoming a criminal and offing the Archduke, but she always managed to hold it together. Lieutenant Chloe Abvance was in a tricky spot, serving under the Archduke. He remembered the time Chloe made a joke and laughed at him, so he decided to punish her for it. And to keep her on her toes, he decided to dock her pay as punishment. Now, she really wanted to kill him. She was mentally scrolling through a hitman's chat when the Archduke interrupted her daydreams. At his request, she would be assisting him at a diplomatic banquet attended by Duke Glintrant. Chloe wanted to tell the Archduke she didn't have a dress suitable for the occasion. Luckily, she had her Royal Guard uniform, so she didn't need a dress after all. The banquet was set for 6 in the evening at Archduke Curtis Schenberg's mansion. It was a seriously huge place, because a third-rank government official could demand serious luxury. Chloe arrived right on time, and a curious butler greeted her at the mansion. He was dying to know why his lordship had been so insistent on having a female adjutant at the banquet. Chloe figured tonight's banquet was basically a wife hunt for his lordship. More specifically, this mansion was where his lordship was supposed to meet Lady Glintrant. Chloe figured the lady probably had plenty of other decent options, but he had his share of baggage too. Chloe didn't know what was going on, and she wanted to find out the Duke's weaknesses and flaws as well. Curtis Schenberg was already waiting for the young lady, and was furious to find her at the mansion later than expected. And on top of that, she was wearing the same clothes he saw her in every day, the same clothes he himself wore. But even if they wore the same clothes, there was still a huge difference between them. Chloe felt awkward, realizing she deserved the nickname Grey Mouse. The Archduke noticed that the girl wore no jewelry at all, and her clothes were rumpled. After a moment's thought, he took off his own accessory and offered it to Lieutenant Chloe, wanting her to wear it. He felt his adjutant shouldn't be seen like this, and demanded she at least put on this piece of jewelry. She didn't understand what was happening or why he was being so nice to her. The hall was dazzling, and Lieutenant Obvans was staring intently, earning her a reprimand from Kurtos. His Majesty was there to greet Archduke Schenberg and Lieutenant Obvans at the mansion. His Majesty was looking for the Archduke so he could introduce him to his future bride, Lady Isabella Glentrent. Curtis was floored. He hadn't heard a thing about a bride or a wedding for that matter. Lady Abvens was hearing high-ranking Ivana's officials argue for the first time, and it made her chest tighten with stress. But the Archduke dared to tell His Majesty something, even though the king wasn't in the mood to listen. Lieutenant Chloe Abvance was presented to His Highness as Curtis's chosen one. The girl wasn't expecting that kind of twist at all. Usually, her life doesn't go the way she wants it to. Now she would finally put her plans into action and punish that scumbag, making him eat dirt. From that moment on, their shared revenge against each other began. The Archduke suggested cutting her hair as a start, but losing control in his rage, he was going to slice it off along with her neck, and she barely escaped with her life. As it turned out, Curtis Schenberg was way too picky about everything around him. The Archduke found Chloe and told her not to go anywhere cause he wasn't done working yet. And on top of that, after reviewing her report, he made her rewrite the whole thing, cause he thought it was terrible. Chloe agreed to everything. But right now, she wanted to see him on his knees and ordered him to do it. It was the first time he'd ever experienced such humiliation, especially from a girl under his command. And she looked at him and realized that her dream had come true, and she'd managed to bring this jerk to his knees. The Archduke was doing everything he could to show the king that there really was a passionate love between them, and that Chloe Abvance, his love, whom he had recently found and now intended to stay with her forever. He was saying such weird stuff that she had to correct him, otherwise something bad might happen. Kicking the Archduke's leg, Chloe wanted to move this ridiculous conversation to another, more favorable day. But the Archduke was speaking with a killer aura, and the effect of her interfering was zero. He cut her off, grabbed her hand, squeezing it tight like he was about to drop some serious truth. Unscheduled promotion, bonuses, a new position, special treatment, privileges, the whole shebang. Plus paid vacation, a chance to renegotiate your annual salary, all this could be yours. Chloe needed to know, like really needed to know, why he wanted to marry her, and not someone from his own social circle. Turns out, in the Ivana's empire, they have this thing called the rich-poor exchange. It's basically a system where if a Grand Duke marries a commoner, he becomes one too, and that means he loses his right to the throne. Those were the rules of the game. To avoid all that mess, he has to marry someone from the aristocracy, but unfortunately, nobody meets the Grand Duke's standards. He just doesn't dig anyone. If the Grand Duke marries Lady Glentrent, it'll forge a bond of love between the two countries. So, a marriage like this had to make His Majesty super happy. And if the Archduke tries to find someone else to dodge the wedding, only commoners would even consider his offer. In that case, the Archduke could either flee the country or lose his claim to the throne by marrying a commoner. He had to make a choice, and by adding a variable, he picked Chloe Abvance. Even though Chloe's family was dirt poor, surprisingly, they held the title of baronet. This way, he could keep his status and avoid marrying the Duke's daughter, who he has zero feelings for. Chloe is the kind of person who can't easily refuse a favor to a duke, and who's easy to divorce. She figured it was all going a little too well for him, but the Archduke reminded her about the money, and also reminded her about the bonus, the job change, and the perks she'd be getting. She remembered that soggy bread and water was still food, and she remembered her family. If it wasn't for her, her family would be starving right now, 'cause she's the only one who can feed them. Chloe had no choice, so without even thinking, she accepted His Highness's marriage proposal. You've got to sacrifice something in negotiations, and they put on a whole show for His Majesty. They got hitched, but Chloe was a total mystery, already plotting her conversation with the Archduke. It all looked super convincing, and the guests cheered the marriage. Checking out the newlyweds, Curtis and Chloe looked happy as hell, so nobody suspected a thing about any deal back in the day. Before the Archduke bowed his head to his subordinate, things were different. The history of Ivana's goes like this. Curtis was born to the King of Ivana's and Princess Glintrent. Curtis's mom was a really smart woman. She didn't want her kid dying from a hard life at war. She demanded her beloved child have status in both countries, and that's why he's got dual citizenship. The problem was, Curtis just kept getting hotter, smarter, and more talented as he got older. To fulfill his duty as the eldest son, he joined the army, and being an archduke, he still had a claim to the throne. This situation was seriously stressing out the king, and his highness needed to do something about it. Maybe they wanted to stash him away under Glintrent before he took the throne, or maybe they were planning to marry him off to Lady Arya from the Navy, who was head over heels for him. Curtis shot down that crazy idea, figuring it wouldn't end well. The Archduke had someone else in mind, though he wasn't sure if this girl would listen to him. It was that lady who played along so well with Curtis and accepted the jewelry from him. He never even imagined she'd be so compliant in every situation. And Chloe's only just realizing now that she's got that kind of talent. Her head was spinning with memories, flashing back to the king and their wedding with Curtis, because what they were plotting was a lie, and lying to the king is basically treason. His Highness didn't get why they'd kept their love a secret for so long, but the young lady explained it away, saying she doubted the Archduke actually loved her. And now that he'd declared his intentions to His Majesty, Chloe supposedly realized he was for real. They put on this whole show, working hard to make sure nobody suspected it was the con. Curtis was struggling to keep a straight face, and Chloe kept reminding him not to drop the act. But no matter how hard they tried to sell their love, His Majesty wasn't buying it. Their plan wasn't working, and they were stuck on what to do next. They had to convince the king otherwise. Lieutenant Chloe came up with a plan. She'd give His Majesty some kind of proof. There was something that was a dead giveaway of how much he loved her. That brooch on her chest, that was straight-up proof her sweetheart proposed fair and square. The Schönberger family crest on the back confirmed it was the real deal. Even though His Grace could still write it off as part of the scheme, there wasn't any other evidence, so they decided to stop digging for dirt and quit getting on each other's nerves. Bottom line, there was no evidence to stop their marriage, so why keep ruining the mood? The situation was defused, but His Grace wasn't happy with how it went down. He wanted cold, hard proof. His Majesty still couldn't buy what he was hearing, but his hands were tied. Going forward, the Archduke planned to ask the Archduchess to keep working with him, but this girl was now seriously interested in their marriage and what it all meant. The Archduke was only planning on pretending they were in love, but things just got real. Chloe couldn't believe Curtis wanted her to fake being a lovesick Archduchess. It stung, knowing her first marriage would be like this. Zero romance, no love at all. Chloe called Curtis out for being so unfair, but he just didn't give a damn. It eased her mind a bit, knowing she wouldn't be the only one losing out. Now she needed something from him too. After everything she'd been through, Curtis was gonna pay her back. Big time. Now that the Archduke desperately needed her and would do anything for the country, Chloe was gonna bring him to his knees. Curtis Schönberg was shocked he was going to have to kneel before his subordinate again. Chloe, relishing the revenge, was dying to see the look on that guy's face kneeling before her now. She wanted him to pay for everything. The overtime, the punishments, all the crap he put her through. Chloe was dying for him to show her the kind of raw passion that would make her trust him. Curtis was shocked that this was actually what she wanted from him most right now. She wasn't ordering him anymore, or even asking. She was practically begging him to get down on his knees. Archduke Curtis wasn't rushing to grant her wish, because he'd forgotten to give her something else crucial. The girl stood there confused, not understanding what the hell was going on. Quick as lightning, Curtis decisively pulled out a small black box. Lieutenant Abvans, watching this whole thing, was impatiently waiting to see how Curtis's antics would play out. This was a huge moment for Curtis. He was about to do something that meant the world to him. Inside the case, a ring glittered, the same one the late king used to propose to his mother. This time he did kneel and bowed his head, but for a completely different reason. Curtis was down on one knee, ring in hand, asking Chloe to marry him. He was really trying to make it as romantic as possible, just how Chloe Advance liked it. It all happened in a way Chloe least expected. But was this even the right thing to do? Word that Archduke Schönberg had a fiancée even reached Duchess Glintland. That jewel sitting in the case was actually a divine flame. Getting married without a proposal felt wrong. And Chloe was being super romantic that day. If that was Chloe's ultimate wish, then Curtis nailed it better than anyone could. But now the girl thought it was all terrible, because this ancestral ring was actually weighing her down. Which means Curtis screwed up again and didn't understand what she meant by getting down on one knee. But it turned out to be much simpler. She was just using his favorite saying, telling him to bow his head. Curtis thought it was a joke, and asked Chloe to confirm he heard her right. The Archduke, getting up off his knees, tried to figure out why she was doing all this, but if he thinks about it, he'll realize why and what she stands to gain. Since Chloe met all the Archduke's demands, she demanded he fulfill any wish of hers. Now he gets it. This was straight up revenge, and Chloe wasn't even hiding it. The girl was worried that because of them, her family would now face the scrutiny of other nobles. This marriage won't just affect her now, but the rest of her family too. From today on, her family will be pointed at and whispered about because of their low status. Chloe has 3 younger brothers and sisters at home who couldn't even finish school. Thanks to the Archduke's behavior today, her siblings have been put in a messed up situation. Chloe wouldn't have agreed to this marriage for $1 billion, but what's done is done. Curtis Schönberg, trying to fix things, promised to take care of this whole mess with the nobles. She turned down his offer, but demanded that she be the dominant one in this contract. She wanted the Archduke to prove her dominance in every damn thing he did, because if he refused these terms, he'd be enjoying his new life on the Glintran coast. It seemed to her that maybe she'd been too harsh and said way too much. She should have kept it together, but in a situation like this, you gotta play rough. Now he'll pay for everything she went through while she was under his thumb. The Archduke had no choice but to obey the Archduchess's orders. In a flash, Curtis Schönberg was sprawled out on the floor in front of Chloe Advance, head down. Nobody knew how long he'd have to hang upside down. But Chloe, seeing how determined he was, got scared he'd get revenge and took pity on him. Catrice wasn't planning on getting back at the girl he saw as the bride he'd always wanted. They agreed that the deal was going smoothly and they should keep it up. But the Archduke really didn't want Chloe to become a victim of this deal. The Archduke asked Chloe one more time, just to be clear, if she would become his wife. He was ready for Chloe to suck every drop of his royal blood dry during their marriage. Chloe couldn't completely own his soul, but he was letting her control him for now. She didn't want to be some temporary owner. He wasn't a dog, but she didn't have a choice, so she made her choice and would become a temporary owner, as sad as it sounded. The Archduke was beaming, stoked that Chloe took the ring. After all, his mom's life changed forever when she accepted this very same ring. He promised this girl it'd be a good omen for her too. Now the ring was shining on her finger, making her officially engaged. And since they were engaged now, according to their laws, they had to spend the night alone together. The Archduchess was freaking out, thinking she was stuck with this moron all night. Clearing up Chloe's bad thoughts, the Archduke clarified he wasn't about to hand out overtime pay for the night. All she needed to do was tweak the military training schedule for the entire year. Chloe couldn't believe it. He pushed her so hard the poor thing burst into tears. All anyone in the castle was talking about was Chloe and the Archduke getting hitched. The Archduchess still didn't trust the Archduke, and secretly sketched caricatures during breaks. Chloe's younger sister, Leah, didn't believe her big sis was being genuine about the engagement. She claimed Chloe was just in it for the cash, and Chloe had no choice but to agree. Chloe couldn't justify herself and didn't want to, flat out deciding not to argue with her little sister. Now, Leah didn't even believe that. She couldn't understand who would marry her sister for money. After ruffling her little sister's hair for saying that, they started talking about the wedding day. The wedding was supposed to happen in 7 days, which was sooner than Chloe expected. Meanwhile, at the Duchess of Glintland's mansion, a report on Chloe Abvins was delivered. Gathered around the table, they discussed the Archduke and his girlfriend's disgraceful behavior. A lot of people were scared of Curtis, except for Chloe Abvance, and the way she called him drove the family nuts. They thought saying stuff like that at a diplomatic banquet was seriously out of line. Chloe calling him darling, and Curtis turning down the king's marriage proposal? Straight up scandalous. The prince siding with Curtis too? That kind of behavior is totally unacceptable for the royal family. The king couldn't believe how easily the Archduke just said he didn't care about the country's interests. The Duchess, over a cup of tea, figured this whole thing would actually benefit their family. Since the people care about the nation, they're going to be way more likely to back His Majesty. And they definitely won't support some guy just looking out for himself. Duchess Glintland kept telling the king that love affairs always crash and burn. After their talk, the Duchess was asked to stay a little longer, and she accepted. The Duchess just couldn't get over the fact that she still hadn't managed to meet Ivanins. She needed to see him just once before Chloe and Curtis's wedding. It was that important to her, but she wasn't giving up. She still had hope to see him. 'Cause hope dies last, right? The Duchess started checking out the stuff brought as a dowry. Picking out one of the vases, she ordered it to be sent as a wedding gift. Meanwhile, back at Curtis's place, things were still hectic. Tying up loose ends. Right now, they were talking about Chloe's family moving in and making sure they'd be comfortable. The Archduchess's family was hyped about the move. Her siblings were stoked and asking a ton of questions. Her family would be safe now, but they still had to nail down all the marriage details. They started going over the demands from both sides, and Curtis was hit with the first condition. Point number 1, no overtime allowed during the contract. Chloe was getting stressed because Curtis kept interrupting, and this point was super important for his image. I mean, everyone thought he was a heartless boss, always making Chloe work overtime. Even though being a boss and a husband are two different things, Chloe knew overtime was unavoidable. She'd have to play the Archduchess 24/7 and hit up those surprise banquets, which, yeah, that's definitely overtime. But the Archduke promised her that when the royal guard's duty called, there'd be no overtime, which meant the no overtime clause during the contract period was a go. First, Curtis wanted to know if Chloe would continue to serve as his aide after they got hitched. The girl agreed, because who else would even want to be his personal aide? Point 2, covered a separate fee for the contract and a salary bump. Even though the Archduke was loaded, he wouldn't budge on giving a raise. I mean, her salary wasn't coming out of his pocket, it was taxpayer money, so he came up with something else. Instead, he offered something way more interesting, $10 million a year guaranteed, which meant a separate $1 million contract bonus was a go. All Chloe Abvans had left to do was read the final point, no 3 of the deal. It stated that Archduke Curtis would always obey Archduchess Chloe Abvans. The Archduke could not agree to that. Maybe he should punish her for this audacity. Curtis was starting to get pissed, and he wanted to lay down the law, but Chloe just wanted to clarify a few things, adding some sub-clauses without actually changing anything. The subclause stated that Curtis had to respect Chloe Abvance and consider her his superior. Plus, according to the contract, Chloe gets 3 personal requests. Curtis was thinking she might see him as some genie, granting her every wish, but the girl had thought it all through, because what she's doing is treason. And if His Majesty gets pissed, Chloe's gonna get torched, not Archduke Curtis. So Chloe and her family's lives are way more on the line than the Archduke's. Now Curtis gets it. She's asking for 3 get-out-of-jail-free cards during the contract. Point 3 stated she always had to obey Chloe Abvance, and that got approved too. And now they had to check out the demands from his lordship, Curtis Schenberg. The first point said the girl has to do her best to fulfill her duty, and that was approved. In point note 2, Chloe has to accept the fake relationship and stay out of it. That's when she started wondering if Curtis was gonna start seeing someone. I mean, they never agreed to be fake married forever, so it shouldn't be a surprise, right? Chloe Abvance just couldn't picture the Archduke actually having a relationship. Like, ever. It said that during the contract, Chloe wouldn't develop any personal interest in Ketris, but since they were married, they'd have to keep up appearances, even fool the servants, and to keep things simple, they'd even have to sleep in the same bed. Now Chloe had a new, totally different kind of interest, and it was mischievous. So in Clause 3, the agreement about personal feelings was crossed out and replaced. They decided Chloe would collect her hair and wear long clothes to bed, and with that, the real contract was finished, and they could finally start their life together. Everything they agreed on had to stay secret, especially from Agatha's little sister. I mean, seriously, his little sister couldn't know jack about this whole sham. Agatha was so head over heels for that snout-nosed punk that even without Chloe's upfront payment, she'd be with him forever. They trusted Noel and asked him to whip up a fake contract to send to the royal family. Now they just had to figure out the dowry thing. But what kind of dowry does a soldier living paycheck to paycheck even have? Archduke Curtis Schenberg tossed out a knower. 80 million. Duchess Glentrant's dowry offer matched it. 80 million. They're stuck competing with that family. That's just how these contract deals go. So now Chloe's gotta work her butt off for 80 million, based on the contract. She didn't know if she could live up to that amount, but hey, the contract was signed. And now they were moving on to the main event of the wedding, her first wedding dress. But when Chloe tried it on, she was seriously pissed about how uncomfortable it was. Even with all the discomfort, a wedding dress is like a flower, the centerpiece of the whole celebration. The problem was the dress was too small, and there was no way to get a different one. 'Cause this dress belonged to his lordship's mother, and it was Curtis's way of showing Chloe his love. Chloe tried everything, but couldn't get the damn thing on. She was starting to freak out. That's when Curtis stepped in. He had more strength, so he easily started cinching the dress's ribbons. They were so close in that moment, she could practically feel his breath on her skin. He was trying to tighten the ribbons as much as possible, and they ended up snapping, sending her tumbling. The fall really hurt. And for a second, she even thought Curtis was going to attack her. 3 days till the wedding, and there was no way they were going to finish a custom dress in time, no matter how hard they tried. Chloe Abrams had an idea, cooking, one she was keeping totally secret, a surprise for everyone. Finally, the big day arrived, a gorgeous wedding ceremony everyone had been waiting for. The day was perfect. The groom looked sharp, the sun was shining, and the birds were singing. Everyone was waiting for the beautiful bride, but she didn't look exactly how she should have. Chloe looked exhausted, but she had a ton of stuff to memorize for these sacred vows. Turns out Prince Frederick, Curtis's nephew, decided to show up to the wedding. Prince Frederick was wondering why the lady was marrying the Archduke in the first place. He figured maybe she was being blackmailed, and straight up told her to give him a sign if she was in trouble. Frederick walked over to remind Curtis about the prayer he needed to attend. Now Chloe was face to face with yet another higher-up, and with the uncle gone, Frederick decided to grill her about why she married the Archduke. The kid was testing her patience, but she still had to say they were in love. But right after the chaos at the banquet, the uncle went straight to see the kid. Curtis walked into the church, handed a paper to the pastor, and asked if he could use his services. But the pastor was freaking out that this wedding would get him banned from the kingdom by His Majesty. The Archduke promised it'd be the last time he ever needed the church's help. Meanwhile, the conversation between the kid and Chloe Abrams continued. And when he asked why she actually married the Archduke, she wanted to spill the truth. But she said that after seeing him in the paper, learning about his heroic deeds, she applied to be his aide. She got lucky landing this gig right away and supposedly fell head over heels for the Archduke at first sight. Maybe Chloe laid it on a little thick about how they met, but hey, she got a compliment out of it. A compliment saying that, all things considered, she actually pulls off the Archduchess thing. Just then, the Archduke got back, and the young prince said his goodbyes and split. Everyone was hyped for the ceremony, gossiping about why the wedding was happening so fast. And get this, the stunning Lady Glintran showed up for the celebration too. She was so gorgeous she'd win even if she wasn't rocking a fancy dress and makeup. The The start of the marriage between Commander Curtis Ciarnock and Ivanis and Chloe Abvance was announced. Finally, the wedding party entered the hall packed with guests who'd been waiting forever. Chloe was rocking a military uniform, which totally freaked out the guests, 'cause she was the Archduchess. They couldn't wrap their heads around why she'd rock up to her own wedding in boots and no dress. Just 3 days ago, when Chloe's ribs were killing her from the dress's tight corset, she pitched a way better idea. I mean, the only must-have accessories at a royal wedding are a crown and a sash. Luckily, they had a crown. The Crown Prince Beatrice's wife sent it over, but you can't just walk out there in your underwear with a crown and sash. That'd be ridiculous. And since they're the Royal Guard, the Guard's got its formal white uniform. And for members of the Royal Guard, who put duty above all else, they could totally throw everyone off the scent. It was a solid idea from Chloe Abbott's, so they decided to wear those dress military uniforms for the wedding ceremony. The guests figured their outfits were some kind of political statement, but it looked awesome, and the late Queen Mildred's crown went great with the uniform. Everyone there figured the bride wouldn't hold a candle to Duchess Glintrand, but that wasn't the case. They were giving off totally different vibes. The wedding ceremony kicked off, and Father James Ruther began his sermon. They were asked if they swore eternal fidelity before the dragon guardians of Ivanessa. Curtis was thinking maybe it's true love, but he doubted it, since they were destined to split. But hey, she's got a pretty face. She could always get remarried in a white dress, and then she'd actually look happy, instead of rocking that permanent frown. Still lost in his daydreams, Curtis imagined she wouldn't be marrying him, and for some reason that ticked him off. But they had so much to go through before that day. The bride was asked if she vowed to stay with her husband till the end of her days, and she agreed, so they asked the groom if he had a vow item for the god. Turns out, the groom did have an item, a beautiful, radiant piece of jewelry. Leaning in so close to Chloe that his lips almost touched hers, he fastened the gorgeous necklace around her neck. The necklace was on, and even with the uniform, it looked incredible. But that wasn't all. Curtis actually had something else for his bride. He pulled out a silk-lined box, and inside was a ring called the Divine Flame. The crowd gasped, because that was the late Queen Mildred's ring. This ring was presented to Chloe Abbotins as a symbol of love and sincerity. Looks like the Archduke really is sincere, giving her that ring. It was kinda weird how people reacted, like it wasn't a normal thing at weddings. Normally he'd give it to Chloe Shenberg, but now it's Chloe Abvance who's getting it, meaning it's got nothing to do with the marriage, and Chloe owns it outright now. She didn't get why she needed it, but Curtis just told her to chill and accept it for now. He explained it was a gift to make up for all the crap he put her through. Now they had to seal the vow with a kiss. Totally expected. It's a freaking wedding. Everything felt surreal for Chloe and Curtis, 'cause they were just going through the motions for the pastor, not out of love. The wedding ceremony was quiet, peaceful, guests mingling all over the palace. Lady Glintrand showed up too, totally confident, banking on her good looks as always. Word was they rushed this wedding because His Majesty was breathing down their necks. But that kiss, the one everyone in the hall saw, that was proof they were in love. Those two are so in sync as a couple, they ditched the reception and bolted right after the ceremony. My guess is the newlyweds ran off to get busy with some hot and heavy loven, but the truth is, they were rushing to brush their teeth because nobody warned them about the mandatory kissing. They brushed like crazy, talking about that kiss, which Chloe found totally disgusting, because it wasn't just a peck, but Curtis couldn't do anything else, or rumors about a fake marriage would spread. And since that's how things played out, Chloe demanded her rightful compensation for the damage. He promised she'd get whatever she wanted after the divorce, but for now, they had to take care of business. It was her first day as an archduchess, so that meant business for the servants too. Opening the window, Curtis showed Chloe Abvance all the subordinates at her disposal. There were so many of them, the girl felt overwhelmed and almost wanted to back out. You could figure 80% of those people were spies for His Majesty. One of the servants was a pretty classy head butler named Philip Delton. Philip ran the show for all those countless Shenberg family servants. He was plotting to control the royal palace staff, but everything flipped after a chat with the kings. Once he found out he'd be butler in the archduchy, he fell in line with the king. And, at his request, he reported on Curtis's every move, looking for weak spots to spill the beans about. That's how he wound up in their family. And of course, before that, he saw what a workaholic the Archduke was. The butler figured Curtis should be living the high life like he's supposed to, but now things are shifting. Because Curtis has an archduchess now, a girl from a poor family and the Navy. Philip's betting she was dreaming of a marriage like this to boost her status. He was going to keep tabs on every move that stuck-up Archduke made, or so he thought. Philip waited for the Archduke and his wife to come out, so he could greet them personally. He figured a girl who was just dreaming of a good marriage and actually landed one was bound to screw up. He saw Chloe as a thorn in His Majesty's side and was always ready to pounce on her mistakes. Chloe knew she couldn't afford to make a single slip-up with all these servants watching, but she tripped on the slippery floor, which was exactly what the butler was waiting for. Philip told her to watch her step and then greeted His Majesty. The butler laid it on thick, saying the palace was blooming again now that Chloe was here. But he was really thinking, looking at her, that the Archduke must have some pretty low standards. After they were introduced, Chloe said she was new to all this and would need the butler's help. It was weird seeing the butler, a servant of His Majesty, suddenly working for Schönberg. But supposedly, His Majesty ordered the butler to start serving His Excellency Schönberg. And if he was just a butler, Chloe wondered why he acted like he was higher up. Chloe's opinion of the butler flipped after he tried to get under her skin a few times. Now it was Chloe's turn to laugh at the butler and bust his chops with everything he said. Philip started trying hard to distract the Archduchess and kept apologizing to her. He kept showering her with compliments to make up for it, but she just couldn't trust him anymore. This butler guy was really working overtime trying to catch Chloe slipping with bad manners. But she wasn't that dumb, and knew his insults were just etiquette textbook burns in disguise. Philip Delton kept making excuses, swearing he was loyal to Milady with all his heart. He was stumbling over his words, like he was searching for help and couldn't find it. Even the servants were getting worried. Philip thought he was going to throw her off balance, but it totally backfired. Chloe's wit was just too sharp. So, after apologizing for crossing the line, he decided to back off. Chloe was pissed, but she didn't want to fire the butler, just demanded a real apology. Like, to make up for ruining her mood, he should plant his face on the floor. Philip Delton was totally thrown, getting humiliated in front of the whole staff. Chloe was teasing him, saying she was in the Navy and might accidentally shoot him. As punishment, he was ordered to stand head down for 3 hours, and then everyone left him alone. Now, bitter Philip was stuck by himself, head on the floor, wallowing in his misery, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. Chloe and Curtis went to lunch, happily enjoying sweet wine and fancy snacks. Through the window, they watched the butler get exactly what he deserved for his nasty behavior. Chloe was finally satisfied, all her stress just melting away. Next on the agenda, figuring out the sleeping arrangements for the night. With dinner done, they were escorted to the bath, since tonight was their wedding night. Everything was set for their relaxation, and Curtis led his chosen bride, Chloe, to his bedroom. It was pretty dark in there, but you could still see the weapons within easy reach. Now she'd have to live in a place like this, with a plain, boring ceiling. Curtis confessed it was the first time a girl had ever been in his bedroom, but he didn't get any praise. Now the Archduchess wanted to blow that bastard Schönberg away with a pistol. Curtis was having a blast messing with Chloe, but when she couldn't find the gun, he just laughed. Choosing a duchess like her, he knew this was the kind of reaction he should expect. Otherwise, their closeness at today's ceremony might seem totally out of the blue. He wondered if that kiss, getting close during the dress fitting and the gift, only mattered to him. Back then, Curtis explained to Chloe that he was the kind of guy who thought virginity was a virtue. But she didn't care. Not even that her amazing husband would stay a virgin even after they were married. The Archduke kept teasing her about her scandalous outfit, but the Duchess trusted his animal instincts, since she'd been in all kinds of embarrassing situations with him, and if anything went down, she was gonna kick him so hard he wouldn't even be able to dream about heirs. After that, she planned to escape through the window, turning in the rapist Archduke to His Majesty. The Archduke was getting tired of Chloe's dumb jokes, 'cause there was no way in hell that would happen. That's when they stopped joking around, and she decided to get some rest and catch some Z's. But Curtis had other plans for her. They still had a ton of stuff to do. He wasn't kidding around, 'cause for newlyweds even 3 hours of sleep is pushing it. A beautiful morning dawned. The sun was already up, and our gorgeous heroine, Chloe, woke up. Like always, she was starving and dreaming about a killer breakfast. The maid said she'd bring them a light breakfast, so they wouldn't overload their stomachs first thing. Over breakfast, Chloe decided to brag that Curtis would never find a wife as hardworking as her anywhere else. He didn't deny it, but hearing it still made him chuckle. Curtis rushed Chloe, since they still had a mountain of things to take care of. Chloe was running her mouth a lot at the table and called Curtis her husband, which totally disgusted her. The diplomatic gala's coming up fast, and they gotta mingle with all the blue bloods. And don't forget, gotta hammer out those thank you notes for the wedding gifts, including one from Isabel Glentrant. Curtis thought that gift was cheap 'cause it wasn't hand-delivered, even though Chloe dug it. She was itching to get back to work, soon as they got all this stuff squared away. But the Archduke told her to chill, and pick out a killer dress and some bling for the gala. Chloe got the green light to hit up the fancy boutiques on Pfaffenton Streaks and snag the best dress and jewelry. Stepping outside, they saw something unbelievable. Hanging from the balcony was the bedsheet from their first night together. Meanwhile, Agatha Mompus was bawling her eyes out over the heartless Duke who dumped her and married someone else. She's Noel Mompus's little sister, and she was a mess, begging her aunt for help. But there's nothing to be done, honey. They already tied the knot, her aunt told her, trying to calm her down. That's her aunt, the Marchioness of Flanders, His Majesty's younger sister and Curtis's older sister. She was having a rough day and asked for ice water, but since they were out of ice, she had to settle for tea. They sent someone to the royal family for ice, but His Majesty was busy, so the ice hadn't arrived for days. Flipping through the newspaper, they spotted a photo of a stained bedsheet hanging on the palace terrace. They saw it as petty blackmail, a sign that supporting Curtis wasn't worth the trouble. The girl couldn't stand the heat, but there was nothing she could do. The ice storage belonged to the state. Setting the paper down, she noticed a gorgeous vase that looked beautiful and top quality. But her aunt, the Marchioness, warned her against it. Knowing that vase only brought trouble she didn't want to talk about, and then her aunt straight up asked her how much longer Agatha was going to keep chasing after Curtis Schenberg. But her love was so strong, the girl just couldn't help herself. Despite everything she did, her older brother refused to help her, and they even gave the divine flame ring to another girl. Now completely obsessed with Schönborg, Agatha convinced her aunt to go to Basilea and get something way better than that ring. They sold the divine flame there once, so it's likely they've got something even better now. She wanted to get to Basilea's so bad, she promised her aunt ice cream if she'd go with her. Aunt Mompus couldn't pass up that offer and agreed to go with Agatha. Meanwhile, the stained bedsheet was hanging up like some kind of art exhibit, and nobody knew who did it. Showing something like that off was a huge no-no back then, and Chloe would definitely make the person who did it pay. Chloe noticed Curtis's bandaged hand and realized he'd used his own blood for this whole show. But whether people would believe in their love and relationship now or not, it didn't even matter anymore. The truth is, the king didn't even need proof of the wedding night, since everyone knew this marriage was so rushed. Sergeant Dubois is escorting Mrs. Schönberg to Pfaffenton Street, replacing Monpim. Curtis was surprised, and Sergeant Dubois pointed out that Curtis usually looks different. He glared at Dubois full of contempt, because the sergeant was eyeing Chloe, and Curtis knew things were about to get interesting. Sergeant Dubois and Chloe used to be friends, and the Archduke was well aware of that. Curtis trusted the sergeant because his wife meant the world to him. After clarifying everything and reaching an agreement, they headed into town. Strolling through the city, checking out all the cool spots, they stumbled upon a cookie shop Chloe's sister used to frequent. The sergeant was still hurt, but since they used to be friends, she didn't want to end the friendship. They finally arrived at Basileur, the jewelry store they were looking for. Spotting the Archduchess's carriage, a swarm of reporters rushed toward them. That's all the reporters who'd been hounding her, blocking the store entrance with a million questions. Beat up and disheveled, they barely squeezed through the crowd and got inside. Waiting for them was the jewelry store's sixth heiress, a girl named Basileur. As a greeting, Basileur wanted to kiss the girl's hand, but to protect Her Highness, Sergeant Dubois wasn't having any of that. Truth is, Basileur just wanted another look at the divine flame. Her father found that stone, but held on to it for ages, 'cause it was so tiny. But after a lot of work, it blossomed and sold, and she was happy to see it shining on Chloe's hand again. She invited them upstairs, where her younger sister, Camille, was waiting. Her sister did all the handcrafting on the third floor of the building, and there they were in the main exhibition hall, Basileur's pride and joy. Place was immaculate. Everything sparkled, but Chloe wasn't exactly a jewelry expert, so they suggested she sit down and think it over. Chloe was looking for cheap stuff, but their store only made top-of-the-line jewelry. The maid kept pushing her to check out the details, hoping she'd find something she liked anyway. So Chloe figured she'd take a look at all of Basileur's stuff, since it'd be tough to find it anywhere else. Chloe's eyes landed on a piece called Bloody Queen, something nobody had ever managed to get their hands on. Turns out the whole district stocked high-end stuff like this, but the prices could be a real buzzkill. Making a choice was tough, so they suggested she pick out jewelry based on her favorite color. The Archduchess figured it was just shiny rocks, not exactly a necessity. And if you can't even eat 'em, there's no point in dropping millions on something like that. But Chloe had to pick out some jewelry. She needed something to wear out. Even with her high roller status, Chloe usually kept it simple with her dresses, just because she liked the color. Totally undecided, the girl's eyes landed on Lady Basileur's necklace. That necklace wasn't for sale, so Camille suggested Chloe check out her father's collection, the one they never showed anyone. This collection was so sweet and pretty, even a kid could pick something out. They used to sell these pieces, but the store's new policy forced them to stop. Chloe decided to take a look at a tiara that was made for a princess. Since their father died 10 years ago, they haven't been able to make anything like that. They started importing this black opal about 5 years ago. Even the Navy was gearing up for war over it. While they were telling the story of this gem, Montpeace walked in. Nobody saw her come in. Nobody knew how, since the entrance was closed to the public. It was that pathetic girl, the one with the hopeless crush on Curtis. Montpeace was losing it, yelling insults at Chloe and Sergeant Dubois, making everyone super uncomfortable. And no amount of begging from anyone could calm her down. It just made her even angrier. Montpeace completely lost it and accused Chloe of hooking up with Sergeant Dubois, claiming he was her real fiancé. Chloe just laughed in Montpensier's face, radiating this divine, fiery aura. She was trying to guess the young lady's age, and figured she couldn't be more than 20. Chloe knew Montpeace was mad at her, but she really didn't want any trouble. The unhinged girl kept hurling insults at the Archduchess, claiming she'd already taken a lover right after her wedding night. Chloe was trying to figure out who she meant, and out of everyone here, it could only be the sergeant. Turns out, that statement actually had some proof backing it up from the Montpeace crew. About 2 months back, word was going around at Urza Dubois' usual hangout about the sergeant's grown-up life. He was fed up with marriage nagging ever since he came of age, just wanted to be free. The sergeant's buddies were busting his chops, saying he was taking too long to find a wife and would end up alone. Then one of his friends pitched him an idea, which he happily went for while he was hammered. The idea was to lie to his family and say Chloe Avens was going to be his wife. They figured if his family heard the sergeant was planning to get hitched, they'd finally leave him alone. Chloe was down with the plan, and as thanks, the guys asked Urza to pour her 100 shots. After that, it was party time. You wouldn't believe the state of Urza's place. And as a reward, Chloe scored a ton of boxes of top-shelf cookies, and they were delicious. Chloe tried saying it was all a drunken joke, but Urza still bought into this whole charade. What kind of aristocrat would agree to something so reckless just for cookies? The Archduchess thought. Mompis was baffled how she could date the lieutenant for 2 months, then betray him by marrying Curtis. She wondered if the master knew Chloe was running around with her lover. Luckily, the Archduchess couldn't care less if this girl thought she was a slut. She pointed out to Mompis that she was just a junior sergeant, while Chloe was a lieutenant, so technically her superior. The young lady was just the daughter of Count Montpense, while Chloe was Archduchess Schenberg, which meant the Archduchess's status was way above that of a count's daughter. But then, for some reason, the girl burst into tears, and Chloe figured it was because of her unrequited love for the Archduke. And no matter how hard Montpense tried to hide it, Chloe was right after all. While they were bickering over who was more important and who should leave Basselor first, Marie walked up. This woman, Curtis valued her above every other aristocrat on his list. Her name was Marchioness Flandria, and she was the king's younger sister. No wonder Agatha Montpense was barking so fearlessly, Chloe thought. The Marchioness apologized to Camille for barging in uninvited. Even though they already had a meeting with other clients, she didn't need to apologize to Camille. They were old friends, and it had been ages since she'd visited Basselur. Curtis Schoenberg showed up right then, because Noel insisted he not leave his wife alone. Especially right after the wedding, the Marchioness apologized again for showing up unannounced, and Curtis, calling her sister, told her not to worry about it. Everyone was surprised to hear such warm words directed at the Marchioness. The guests decided to head upstairs to see more of the jewelry. While hanging out in Basile, the Archduke overheard Chloe's entire conversation with Lady Montpense, along with the Marchioness of Flanders. They were listening to Chloe's backstory, the one everyone in the guard knew. The Archduke, totally shaken, couldn't believe his ears. He'd heard something that made him doubt Chloe, but it was just the 1st Division commander talking trash when he was drunk. Curtis was surprised how much his wife cared about Agatha when she burst into tears, crushed over her feelings for him. He couldn't figure out if she was just naive or secretly smart, worrying about Montez in a situation like that. Aunt Marie also eavesdropped on Agatha's chat with everyone else. Now Curtis wasn't hiding anymore and wanted to gift the Archduchess some stuff from this store. They had a bunch of tiaras and necklaces that the old king ordered for Princess Marietta. Chloe realized why Basile hadn't shown her the jewelry. The Marchioness didn't want to screw up her relationship with Curtis. One of the tiaras that Chloe's sister liked had a gemstone that money just couldn't buy. Their dad put extra care into making that tiara, so the girls couldn't afford to treat it carelessly. Cutting through the chatter, Curtis decided to officially introduce his wife, Chloe Reed David Schenberg. His sister, still waving her fan, was thinking that fate itself must have brought them together. Lady Montpense couldn't believe the news, hoping that Curtis would still say it was all a lie. But, unfortunately for her, it all turned out to be an unpleasant truth. Agatha was screaming and demanding an explanation for why he dumped her and married another woman. But Curtis Schenberg saw that her manners hadn't improved, and she was still just as reckless as ever. He once wanted to make her his Archduchess, but seeing her thoughtless behavior, he changed his mind. He explained that he didn't dump her to marry someone else, and her status had nothing to do with his feelings either. Montpense told him it was because she loved him so damn much that she joined the royal guard. When he found out, he was pissed. He never would have let her do that. Agatha burst into tears, and the aunt was even more bummed, saying they'd have to postpone the ice cream. Lady Montpense was taken away to calm down, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The Marchioness apologized again for the shop incident, then asked Chloe to introduce her sisters, There was Leah, who took after their dad, and Iris, who looked just like their mom, and another little sister, the chattiest and most hyperactive of the bunch. The lady was considering giving Lady Iris the tiara she was wearing as an apology, but Chloe laughed, because Curtis decided to apologize for her by letting his wife protect her pride. Afterward, they went to get ice cream. Everything was awesome, and Urza went along with her sisters. They're supposed to meet at Eleanor's soon, and Curtis has to bring his wife at the Marchioness's request. At least, that's what Chloe gathered from the Marchioness. Seeing as she saved Curtis's bacon today, Chloe's never been to Eleanor's before, since it's a well-known salon run by female officers. Now she not only has to attend a gathering of high society ladies, but she's got to organize it too. Lady Chloe Abvance was chowing down on that ice cream like there was no tomorrow, and even wanted to take some to go. But it was a bit pricier than Curtis expected, and Chloe got all flustered. Not knowing high-ranking aristocrat etiquette, she stood up and got closer to her husband to ask if she could take it with her. He told her she couldn't, so she decided to send it to Marchioness Flanders instead. He agreed to that, but they'd need a ton of ice, and on top of that, the Marchioness had an ice cellar at her place. Chloe talking to him so close made Curtis feel all hot and bothered, and he asked her to back off. The girl figured it was because it's rude to talk standing up, but it was something else entirely. Plus, she thought maybe he hated the perfume Julia put on her. Curtis straight up confirmed it, which pissed Chloe off big time considering he was just sharing her bed. Chloe was stoked she sent the ice cream, 'cause now the Marchioness can pig out on it. Curtis was blown away by how sharp she was, sending a ton of ice with the ice cream. The jewelers kept thanking her too, all because of her order. The Archduke ordered that Chloe get every piece of jewelry she touched. They sold off half of Lady Camille's collection, even her personal jewelry. Chloe looked like she was hating it, even though she said she loved everything. Curtis was just busting her chops, trying to figure out if she was into him, and the Archduchess was making it totally clear she wasn't a fan of him. With that done, they headed off to get some top-tier clothes, but this time to her specifications. This time, she was going to show Archduke Curtis Schenberg what real hardcore spending looked like. For footwear, she wanted boots that were comfy, and she picked pigskin for the lining. She passed on the big floppy hat, opting for a short visor and simple decorations instead. With her order placed exactly how she wanted it, Chloe didn't look as withdrawn and lost as she did at the jewelers. She often ordered clothes for Leah and Iris, but unlike them, she usually just wore her military uniform. Chloe explained that because of their tough family situation, a lot of schools turned Iris down, so she needed to at least dress decently so she wouldn't get hassled. And that's when Curtis decided to offer Chloe a private tutor. Chloe shot back, saying usually, relatives of a married woman don't live in her new place. Still, with a 40 grand salary, she could feed them, clothe them, get them shoes, and raise them without breaking a sweat, and she spent a decent amount to keep them looking sharp. Seeing the beautiful fabric in Chloe's hands, the Archduke decided to buy it for her, thinking it suited her perfectly. No matter how you slice it, even though she's usually rocking a military uniform, she's really enjoying this shopping spree. More than likely, when ordering clothes for her sisters, she was thinking about what would look good on her and what she liked best. Curtis figured Chloe probably wasn't regretting giving up her inheritance to take care of her sisters. Seeing her like this, he knew bringing her here was the right call. Chloe, happy she could spend that much, showed Curtis the receipt, but he wasn't surprised at all. Even though she knew she'd dropped a ton of cash, Curtis suggested she buy a house too. Chloe agreed, but she forbade tearing down the old one because she was waiting for her parents to come home. Her deadbeat parents had been living in another country for years now. Even if there weren't any jewels or clothes, Curtis figured it was too dangerous for the Archduchess's family home to be so close to the road. But it wasn't just about her parents. Chloe was sure it'd be ridiculous if she ended up living in her ex-husband's house after the divorce. But Curtis was so into her, he'd even forgotten all about their planned divorce. And Chloe, looking at herself in the mirror, felt totally awkward, even though it was beautiful and expensive. Maybe it was because she felt like it didn't really belong to her, just like everything else. Chloe stared at herself in the mirror for so long. At one point, it seemed like it just wasn't the right fit. Actually, it looked amazing on her, so Curtis told her she was staring at herself in the mirror for way too long. Chloe couldn't believe her ears. Did he really just say something that made her change her mind like that? She felt weird wearing something like this, but it looked cute and felt comfy, as long as she didn't think about the price tag. Truth is, these clothes cost a fortune, but to an archduke they're worth like bubble gum. She could never get used to this, 'cause these things just weren't her. Right then, she figured she wasn't a real archduchess, and her marriage was just some act. And someday she'd walk off this stage and go back to being the real her, leaving Curtis alone up there, surrounded by these people who were hungry for the show to go on. She didn't want to be the only one who felt pathetic and totally useless. On the ride home, Chloe watched Curtis, trying to figure out what he was thinking being next to her. But even if he was thinking about her, his face didn't show a thing. He was calm as always. Curtis told Chloe he wanted her to cut ties with Lieutenant Dubois for a while. He didn't want his wife hanging around other dudes for no reason. So, that just meant the Archduke overheard their little chat that day. Chloe, wanting to clear things up, explained that she and the lieutenant were just friends, and that's when Curtis chimed in, saying there's no such thing as friendship between a man and a woman. Meanwhile, Agatha, totally bummed out and thinking about her sweetheart, just couldn't calm down, 'cause she was so head over heels for him. They tried to comfort her by bringing up her mom, who couldn't even sleep because she didn't want to get married. But Agatha wasn't having it. No amount of talking could soothe her. I mean, you can fix insomnia with medicine, but the Archduke marriage? Not even doctors could fix that mess. Agatha knew Chloe didn't love the Archduke at all. It wasn't just a lack of love, it was more like disdain. The humiliation from 3 years ago, the one her brother brought up, showed that he didn't love her. The poor girl got so upset that she jumped out of the carriage and ran off without looking back. Maybe they should have gone after Agatha, but they decided to leave her be. She'd probably come back when she got hungry. In that moment, running away, she hated them all, especially her brother for bringing up what happened 3 years ago. Her mom, too, who never understood her feelings and always pushed her to get married. That woman who married the Archduke, even though she didn't even like him. And even the damn Archduke himself, who she used to think was so amazing. She hated him most of all right now. The girl just didn't want to marry some regular Joe off the street, and she kept saying it, crying, as she ran, listing all her grievances in her head. She realized she was lost and had no idea where to go. The girl just wandered aimlessly and ended up in some dark, unknown place. It looked a little dangerous, but intriguing, and she wanted to explore the shadowy alleys. In one of those alleys, she overheard 2 bums making a deal involving some white powder. She was freaked out and wanted to go home, but on the way, a woman grabbed her attention. Squinting through the dark, she noticed the woman's clothes looked like a noble's. It was Isabel Glentrand. But why she was in a dump like this was a mystery, and Agatha wondered if she might be a spy. Agatha figured her messed up feelings were more important than any of this crap, and remembering Curtis, she hurried home. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Chloe Shenberg was still living the quiet, carefree life. She didn't know how long she could keep this up, so she just soaked up every minute. But things weren't peaceful after the honeymoon, and everything was about to change. Everywhere you turned, people were whispering that their marriage was probably just for show. Back to work, they had a scheduled meeting with Admiral Victor. They met because Victor had a message for them from His Majesty. General Shenberg's wedding stirred up trouble in the Guard. The knights split into 3 main camps. Some felt bad for Chloe. Others thought she was genuinely in love, even if she wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. And then there were those who figured Chloe was just trying to claw her way to the top, aiming to become an archduchess. Rumor had it her home life sucked, and that she had no shame. Power was all that mattered to her, but a lot of guys believed Chloe was just trying to climb the ladder, and that was the most common take. Suddenly, everyone shut up. Squad leader Dubois walked in. He'd overheard a lot and wanted to know what they were talking about. The knights, claiming it was just a joke, were hoping for some leniency, but the guard leader was shocked that royal guards were cracking jokes that insulted the Archduchess, a member of the royal family. He threatened to rat them out to the commander of the third squad and let him know what jokers they were. They apologized, but they were warned that next time, life in the guard wouldn't be so fun for them. Everyone and their mom was trying to get the dirt on Chloe and Curtis's relationship. Insults and cheap shots were flying at her from every direction. Dubois was still trying to figure out why Chloe got married, and why she was in uniform instead of a killer dress, and whether airing your dirty laundry like that was even the right move. It was almost baffling why she picked that guy and got zero respect from him. I mean, plenty of women get tricked into marrying losers, right? He felt sorry for Chloe, figuring she knew just how ruthless Curtis was, being his aide and all. But still, why Chloe would pick him, Dubois couldn't wrap his head around it. It's kinda weird to think that girl was secretly hooking up with Curtis. Truth is, Dubois wanted to ask Chloe if she was okay, but he was too scared, even though they were close. He wanted her to open up about her past relationships, but he also felt like she was pushing him away, and he didn't know if he was imagining it. Chloe just felt so distant, which is why he was acting all awkward and aloof. Now he was regretting it, especially since even when Agatha blew Chloe off, he couldn't do anything about it. When that dude, Kurtz, showed up like a knight in shining armor, Dubois felt like he was getting the boot, like he was suddenly surplus to requirements. Sarah came over 'cause she had a personal problem she wanted to ask about, but they just plonked her down at the table. It was about her mom. She wanted to invite Her Grace to a meeting. It shouldn't be a big deal. But Her Grace the Archduchess turns down every invitation, so Admiral Victor was supposed to deliver His Majesty's message about throwing a housewarming party. It needs to be a super fancy housewarming, with all the high-ranking nobles and the entire royal family, and Archduchess Chloe Schenberg herself has to organize it, since she's part of the royal family now too. Today marks the 28th anniversary of our duchy's diplomatic ties with Glentrand. But since the engagement between Glentrand and Schönberg fell apart, this banquet's gotta go off without a hitch. Chloe suggested bringing in more experienced royals than her. But one's got a killer cold, and the other, the Marchioness of Flanders, is tied up with some assignment from His Majesty. Pointless to argue, so Victor just told them to get their act together. No excuses. They promised they would, but that's not what he was getting at. Victor wanted to remind them that he was the one who introduced them, and got Officer Burke into the Navy, telling them to watch their step. The Admiral pointed out they're always keeping their distance. If they're gonna play the part, they gotta commit, not make it so obvious they can't stand each other. Even if His Majesty's clueless and naive, he'd still catch on, so they need to fix this ASAP. It was a perfect sunny day, but for Chloe and Curtis, it started off a little different. First thing, Curtis suggested they hold hands to throw off suspicion from the guards. But the Archduchess really didn't want to, and since she didn't have a choice, she had to agree. Spotting them, people around them whispered about their great love, 'cause it looked totally legit. Now they were following Admiral Victor's advice and always held hands, even when they really didn't want to. They weren't keeping their distance anymore, 'cause they hadn't realized it made their love look fake before. On top of all that, Curtis had this look on his face that he seriously needed to fix, or rumors about a fight would start. Also, the Admiral mentioned her getting fired. His Majesty wanted to remove Chloe from her adjutant position, but no way that was happening. His Majesty used all his power and tricks to do it, but in the end, he totally failed. And that slave contract, the one that paid a ton of cash in exchange for never being able to leave, was impossible to forget. Before Chloe showed up, finding an adjutant for Curtis was such a nightmare, the Admiral even got the King's seal of approval. The royal seal can't be challenged, not even by the King himself, and to remove Chloe, you need Curtis's okay. Curtis was stoked he was giving the King a hard time. Chloe figured Curtis would be better off firing her and pretending to obey the King. Even though he really wanted to protect her, Chloe thought the right move was to throw her to the King like a bone. All the while, he could be quietly preparing for the next play. Ever since Chloe Abvance took the name Shenberg, she's been doing everything she can to live up to her responsibilities. By getting involved in this mess, Chloe's calculated everything that could happen to her, from 1 to 100, including getting fired. As they walked around the kingdom, Curtis kept his ears open, felt like they were being watched. But it was just the gardeners, no threat to them at all. Truth is, the Archduke's been dodging assassins since he was a kid, so he's super sensitive to people sneaking around. He also knew Chloe wasn't nearly as careful as he was, always keeping her guard up. Then, during one of their fights, Chloe calls him Brigadier General, which she never does. That was a callback to point 3 of their marriage contract, where it says Catrice always has to obey her. Catrice felt like Chloe was calling him trash, and he hated her saying it in front of other people. She realized she'd screwed up and wanted to apologize, but Catrice, knowing the lieutenant wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, could understand where she was coming from. Being in the middle of the palace, she should have been watching her mouth, and she knew it. But her personality just wouldn't let her be all polite and proper. She couldn't help it. Feels like if you killed her personality, she'd just die too, since she always did whatever she felt like. Alright, so she better offing her opponent without a single damn regret. In the heart of the kingdom, the whole world seemed to be watching the beloved Archduchess, her spirit renewed. For Curtis Shenberg, Chloe was like a superior officer, and he respected her for it. For Chloe, it was a condition of the marriage, and she was completely certain about that. She ordered him to take 2 steps forward, bringing him closer to her, even though he was more obedient than she thought. Now she'd have to look up at him, and that was just awkward. So she suggested he sit on the nearest bench, and she started the conversation. She asked how many years he'd served, and got the answer that he'd been serving for 12 years, or rather, it was his 12th year. Now she was curious how much training a new recruit goes through before being assigned to a unit, and it takes 2 months for that. And now she wanted to know how much time had passed since they got married, and it had only been 10 days. Look, we can treat this like a training period. Rookies make mistakes, and that's why she's apologizing to him. She didn't get why he was being such a jerk, blaming her so hard for mistakes after he asked her to marry him. She called him out for treating his wife worse than he'd treat some fresh recruit, and seeing Curtis mood tank, she wanted to give the ring back. Curtis, apologizing for being harsh, told her not to do it. Then, out of nowhere, he pulled her in tight, not explaining anything or even asking if it was okay. Even after Chloe actually saw the guy lurking behind them, she still didn't understand what Curtis was up to. She wondered if those guys could even hear how quietly they were talking. Now the Archduke could easily apologize while holding Chloe close. He knew she was ticked off, but he was telling her not to waste one of her 3 wishes like that. But she was just repeating her sister Leia, who always said, if you hoard something, it turns to crap. That just cracked them up. And with a personality like that, Curtis could never ditch her. How could he leave an Archduchess in front of the king, knowing she'd be attacked the second she spoke? So whether it's Admiral Victor or someone else, he's gonna have to play every card he's got. To Chloe, those words sounded like he was going to protect her. But whatever Chloe thought, he swore he wouldn't leave her as bait for his brother. He'd rather go to Glentrong. Chloe didn't believe those words were meant for her. It felt like they should belong to someone else. Others were listening too, and seeing them understand each other, they hugged even tighter. Still under observation, Chloe suggested the Brigadier General get down on one knee to sell their relationship. He knew he was gonna stain his clothes, but right now he didn't care. With Chloe, he never acted normal anyway. The way he took the bait, how those words stung him and flooded him with emotion, none of it mattered. Curtis did it without even thinking, like he'd fully absorbed the general's teachings. Now they should hold hands. It's common knowledge they're married. No need to be shy. Archduke Schönberg has ignored the king's orders to dismiss Lieutenant Chloe for the 4th time, but he didn't care if it was 5 or 6. As prince of the Ivama's family, he was using his legal right to defy the king. The king couldn't trust his wife with the banquet, afraid she'd screw it up and embarrass them both. We're talking about a diplomatic reception, and the Archduchess will remain a lieutenant in the royal guard. According to the Ivane's ruling house military code, he obeys Curtis's orders. He didn't deny he'd fulfill his duty as a prince, but strictly within the bounds of military discipline. Right now, the king can't do anything because it'll just escalate the conflict even further. And Chloe's words about tossing her to the king like a chew toy were also true. But then he wouldn't see the king's face go ballistic. He figured yesterday's hug with Chloe was just some kind of reflex reaction to the pleasure rush. Maybe Curtis would even give Chloe a bonus for that and take her shopping or something. And since the conversation with the king was over, he headed for the exit, hearing "Don't come back" thrown after him. So since that's how it is, now all that's left is to drive the king completely nuts. But Curtis's good mood didn't last long. Running into these morons ruined everything. They were yapping about how Curtis, Mr. Clean Warrior himself, touched someone else's hand, and how he willingly held someone's hand, and on top of that, it was Chloe Abbins, a total violation. Here come Lieutenant Urza Dubois and Corporal Sarah de Thorny to greet them. And what's illegal here is Lieutenant Abbins's beauty, which you could compare to an actual crime. Saying stuff about someone else's wife? Way out of line. And those marriage congrats were way too familiar. They apologized and swore to do better, but Chloe told them to chill, knowing they were just friends. Captain Tournier addressed Lieutenant Abvans on a personal matter. See, her mom, the Countess de Tournier, is dying to meet the Archduchess. Her mom sent 2 daughters to the army, which is a huge deal, and the Archduke wants to swing by, even for a second. And since Curtis has to escort her, she asked Chloe if she could take his arm. He just got back to work yesterday, and he's short on time, so they hurried things along. Her first day back after the wedding was surprisingly chill, and Chloe started to relax a little. Sitting in her office, she was glad things were going as expected. She just didn't know when Erza would cool off. But her relaxed focus was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Their conversation kicked off with her pointing out how messed up the Archduchess's office looked. This was Madame Bring, the assistant personally picked by the king. Thinking he was doing Chloe a favor to keep an eye on her. She absolutely hated how a royal's workspace could look so unacceptable. She explained she was there on the king's orders regarding the big reception everyone was already prepping for. She claimed that because Chloe hadn't lost her title, it was now harder for the royal family to offer help. Madame Bring immediately started barking orders around the Archduke's office and got called out for it right away. This weird lady, trying to justify herself, didn't see what the big deal was about suggesting the newlyweds take a seat. Chloe offered to take her to the ladies' waiting room, but she thought it was too cramped and not suitable for older women. The Archduchess understood why she had to stick her head in the royal snake's mouth, be nice, and play along. After all, Madame Bring thought suggesting they sit on the freaking bed was outrageous. Chloe even offered to help her standing up, but Madame acted like that was worse than being treated like a servant. Chloe thought she was dealing with someone strong-willed, but Bring just turned out to be a gossipy old hag. Bring also couldn't wrap her head around why the girl and the Archduke were turning down His Majesty's generosity. Madame talked so much and about everything, Chloe just tuned her out and got to work. Like, lady wasn't even done talking. And apparently Chloe was breaking some etiquette rules. Bring figured she was only being halfway nice to the girl because of the king. Chloe came from a family that was given their title, so she'd never had to plan or even attend events like this. So she had to ask Bring how these things usually go down. Madame Bring took the question as a joke, but even the wedding banquet after the engagement was a first for Chloe. Bren called Chloe's confession a disgrace since she was third in line at court. Chloe didn't think it was shameful, but Madame explained that high status comes with high expectations. After all, a ruler's gotta know everything, and not knowing something is a total disgrace. That's why she's grilling you now, since His Majesty sent Madame to help her and live up to the king's expectations. From now on, Madame's gonna turn Chloe into a real ruler, even if it's ridiculously hard. Chloe learned one thing as an adjutant. Big shots ain't gotta get their hands dirty with everything. I mean, they're important and irreplaceable, and they only deal with the really important, irreplaceable stuff. Basically, you can dump the grunt work on the grunts, like Chloe used to be. Setting up the royal banquet is obviously important, and Chloe La David Burke should definitely be in charge. But the problem is, taking on everything from start to finish just ain't fitting for someone of your standing anymore. Long story short, little things like learning how to run banquets are now Madam Bring's problem. Training started, and first things first, we gotta figure out the party's point and who absolutely has to be there. The reason for this shindig, it's the 28th anniversary of establishing diplomatic ties with Glentran. The invites gotta include the Glentran delegation and basically anyone connected to that country. From our local big shots, we're talking Countess Annelle and her hubby, Baron LeBlanc, Viscount Fleur and his wife, the Rihanna family, and Baron Wars. We gotta hand-deliver handwritten invites to these VIPs, specifically on the list. The invites gotta have some mushy stuff about the 28-year relationship, and it's gotta be all handwritten. That's gonna be a pain, 'cause the only handwriting she knows is the official palace font. If some other official uses that font to write for her, nobody's gonna bat an eye. And on top of that, she's gotta memorize all these nobles' faces. Though she did learn all their names before the wedding, now Chloe's gotta learn how to properly greet these foreign aristocrats. First off, back straight. No bending at the spine or lower back. Keep that left leg back, just bend your right knee. Chloe was super impressed. Madame Bring was a total pro at bowing. Chloe got handed this ledger with records from every banquet for the last 20 years. After thanking Lieutenant Noel, Chloe was positive he'd handwritten the whole thing. She was so blown away, she practically thought he was an angel. Actually, the Archduke was saying he was planning on hitting up the Royal Archives himself. State affairs ain't kid stuff, they're important events. Of course, they gotta be documented. Chloe didn't get why Curtis was even bringing it up. She was sure Lieutenant Noel copied it all. Then the Archduke told her to stop wasting time being impressed and start memorizing at least one letter from it. And Chloe shot back that he was just being a pain, and maybe he should take lessons from the lieutenant who transcribed the whole thing by hand. On top of that, Noel doesn't force anyone to work overtime, and she ran off to try and learn something, anything. While the Archduchess was busy practicing her curtsies, Bring decided to ask a question that was really bugging her. She wanted to know if that attitude she was showing earlier was genuine praise and humility. The girl decided to stop messing around and answer honestly, and her answer was a big, fat no. Then the madam tried to explain that she was just genuinely trying to help, which was true, because if she wanted to suck up to the king, she could have fed her false info and made her look like a total joke. But she's got a sense of responsibility. She actually lives up to her reputation. She's a person who knows what dignity and etiquette are, and that the help she's giving and will give is the real deal. That's why Chloe apologized to the older lady, who was just trying to do her job honestly. Chloe respected His Majesty, because she was also a subject of Ivanus, but Bring had no idea what she was getting at. She was trying to say Bring was here specifically to mold her ignorant self into a ruler worthy of the throne. The dance lessons continued, and for a beginner, she was actually doing pretty well. Chloe was on duty and short on time, but Madame couldn't let Ivans get caught in an embarrassing situation. They almost got into it, and since we're talking about blame, she put it all on the Archduke and said to take it up with him, not her. But His Grace Curtis was doing everything he could at that moment to avoid any kind of scandal. Madam explained that yesterday afternoon, he personally pulled the protocol for the reception ceremony from the Royal Archives. It was clear that the lieutenant hadn't prepared those records at all, and Noel showing up on the Duke's orders was proof. The general didn't expect Chloe to go so far as to accuse him of disgrace, but he admitted to his share of the responsibility. The Archduchess knew he'd heard everything, but she just didn't get why he always showed up at the most crucial moments. Before the diplomatic banquet started, Eleanor's meeting still had to happen, and time was running out. Chloe had no say in any of this. They just decided for her and used company time to train the Archduchess. The day to show off Madame Bring's training results came way quicker than expected. Today's the day of Eleonora's gathering and Chloe's official debut. His Highness showed up and they gave him the head seat at the table. One of the guests was Lieutenant Theodora de Tonier. Sarah Tonier's older sister. She fought under Curtis. They already set up her spot in the hall, and the meeting starts as soon as she sits down. So, since Marquis Flanders is a no-show, she'll take the most honored seat. And standing in the distance was the Archduchess's old Navy buddy and best friend, Laura Lagache-Clouet. It had been ages since they'd seen each other. She asked Chloe if she remembered her, and was stoked her bestie hadn't forgotten her. She left the service, got married, and became part of the Viscount Gaultier family, dedicating herself entirely to her family. Her husband thought staying home was bad for her and suggested they check out their gathering. They were such close friends that they even signed up for the Navy together for the money. The girls agreed they would maintain their friendship, no matter what. After thanking her, Laura just said her first name, which wasn't the done thing in the military. Lieutenant Chloe didn't appreciate Laura being so casual, since in the army, you addressed people by rank. But Madame Bring explained that Eleanor's gatherings were different. There, she wasn't a senior lieutenant, but Archduchess Berg, and if anyone dared to disrespect her, it would be a challenge not only to her house, but an insult to the royal family. Chloe understood she was there to support not just the Archduchess, but also for the glory of Ivana's, so even Chloe shouldn't rely on personal connections when such an important matter was at stake. Chloe sounded convincing, hoping those present would understand her point. She was trying to be impartial and fair. No favoritism allowed, and Laura, her best friend, got the deeper meaning of Her Royal Highness's words and didn't argue with her. Hoping Chloe would understand, she just wanted to help. Even if it was because of their old friendship, someone suggested Lady Felpington take over the cooking since she had experience, and they also had to figure out the staff assignments, which felt like way too much for Chloe. She figured if it weren't for Theodora, everything would fall apart, and maybe Theodora should be the Archduchess. All Chloe had to do was make decisions, and she felt like everyone was working too hard because of her. Ideally, the prince's wife or the Marquis of Flanders should handle this, but who knows if the princess will even show. The reception was coming up fast. The guest list felt a mile long, and she had to greet everyone on it. Social skills were key, and if Her Royal Highness struggled, people from the assembly promised to help her out. Lady Monpence was at the meeting too, and she kept taking potshots at Chloe. The meeting went on. Lady Avon and Crayon were supposed to pick the furniture, and the rest of us would handle decorating the hall. The assignments were done, and everyone split up to get to work. Chloe, her friend Laura, and Theodora started picking out tableware, focusing especially on the color. They were talking about how the late Queen Mildred's marriage to the previous king made it impossible to establish new relationships. And since the late queen passed, they were worried that white tableware would be associated with death. For Chloe, white was like the queen's wedding dress, but the king probably wouldn't approve of white. And since her ladyship was from the fleet, they decided to look at blue tableware to emphasize the fleet's influence. Chloe found high society so exhausting, where everyone had agendas and rehearsed lines, like, Lady Mompus came here just to nitpick at the Archduchess, so Laura's trying to network harder now that Chloe's an Archduchess. And then there's Theodora, the most mysterious one. She helped, but without any real warmth. It wasn't just that she didn't want to get involved in social drama, it was something else entirely. Madame Bring interrupted her thoughts, saying the Archduke himself had stopped by to see her. Apparently, the Archduke had an urgent message for her and wanted to personally escort her. The Archduke walked in, didn't greet anyone, and went straight to Chloe. Without a word to anyone, he asked her to leave with him. Chloe was thrilled. She was so tired she didn't want to stay another minute. She said goodbye to Theodora, promising to handle the rest of the issues herself. Time for dance lessons. Madame Bring was teaching them, constantly rushing them and speeding up the tempo. When Chloe asked what he needed to talk about, that made him drag her away. He said a maid ran off, but that was just an excuse. Taking dance lessons gave them plenty of time to hash out all the misunderstandings that built up during their service. And to talk about all those times they were secretly jealous of each other. The Archduke, holding Chloe close during a dance, asked if she was jealous of him, and she said she wasn't. But, knowing everything, he asked her not to be jealous, at least not of Officer Tournier, because even he knew that hitting on two women in the guard was pushing it too far. Chloe was thinking, what if she hadn't joined the service, or what if Sarah or Theodora retired? The Archduke asked what she was thinking about, and Chloe replied that the maid who ran away was treated badly. He went through dozens of aides when he was alone, and that kind of treatment is just asking for a revolution. The madame didn't let them talk for long and was always pushing them, never giving them a break. The dance was so fast, Chloe kept tripping in her ridiculously poofy dress. Bitching about Curtis making her wear a dress, she reminded him he could just check out the maids in theirs. They couldn't let their guard down. Madame Bring was cooking up more and more stuff for them, but Chloe found time to chat, and this time she was curious about what the Archduke and Tournier talked about that day. The dance went on, but so did their conversations, like how Madame Dubois had taken ill, and that her son was a complete idiot for letting his woman get stolen, leaving him all alone. The Archduke asked if anyone had ever deceived her, and told her to think hard and answer honestly. Curtis asked that question out of jealousy, because every time he saw that guy and the way he looked at Chloe, it drove him crazy. He even wondered if there wasn't something more to that deal with the few boxes of sweets. Even if Chloe was innocent, who knew what that guy was thinking, and she replied that if she could think straight, she wouldn't have married him in the first place, and he should be glad she was such an idiot. Curtis was hanging on every word the Archduchess said, like it was a masterpiece. Whoever picked her was a straight-up genius. Preparations in the hall were in full swing. The girls were putting the finishing touches on setting the table. Laura, knowing Tournay belonged to the 8th Army Regiment, was wondering why she wasn't in Celti. Turns out, she was only temporarily assigned to that regiment, ordered to protect a VIP. As she arranged the dishes, Lieutenant Tournier really hated the blue plates. She thought they looked too clunky. And since soldiers are supposed to be quick thinkers, Laura suggested swapping them out for a different color. The girls were beat, so they decided to take a breather and swap some wild stories. Lady Montpense cut them off, saying their chat was inappropriate and an insult to His Highness Berg's name. But nobody was trying to insult him. Lady Montpense was just twisting things, like always. She never expected Montpense to defend the Archduchess's interests so fiercely. Even she didn't get why she was defending the woman who stole the Archduke right out from under her nose, but the Archduchess once took pity on Montpense, felt bad for her tears, and that still stuck with her. Montpense was saying that if Laura was part of Eleanor's circle, she had to set a good example for the crown's sake. Theodora jumped in, telling them to stop talking about people who weren't there. Break time was over, and they got back to work, totally exhausted and wishing the reception would end already. The Archduchess still had a ceremony to get through too, but first they had to wait for the Marquis of Flanders. Lieutenant Tournier, sitting in her office, was writing in her journal about how it was a clear day outside, but she felt gloomy inside. She'd been in charge of guarding Duchess Glintrand for 2 weeks now. Suddenly, someone barged into the office with news that Duchess Glintrand had vanished again. She wasn't some hired killer, just a regular aristocrat, and the lieutenant couldn't figure out where she got those skills. Now she slips past the guards like a ghost, but she used to get lost in the garden, using it as an excuse to ditch. Just the other day, she said she was looking for the restroom, got separated, and then vanished completely. And yesterday, she felt so bad about pulling soldiers away from their duties that she disappeared again afterwards. She's pulled this stunt hundreds of times with all sorts of lame excuses. And today, she's bailed on us again? Nobody understood how she kept getting away, and the timing of her disappearing acts was totally random. Nerves were frayed, Tourney was losing it, and finding Glintrand warned her she was now a suspect in espionage, but in response, Duchess Glintrand just got even more elaborate in her vanishing act. Even the king shrugged it off and told her to leave her alone, saying a woman who's been through a breakup needs to soothe her heart. Then Lieutenant Torney got word that Duchess Glentriand had been found. Everyone was shocked to learn that the Duchess had been with the king. The king summoned Lieutenant Tournier, telling her that Archduke Berg, who was supposedly fighting for the country, had shown his true colors. And since Tournier was also part of Eleanor's inner circle, he wanted her to keep an eye on the Archduchess. She hated being treated like this, realizing it was probably all happening because of what went down yesterday. Just yesterday, she and her sister were happily discussing her meeting with the Archduke and the invitation to visit them whenever she was free. Things were so messed up that she was planning on making a ton of entries in her diary today. At this 28th anniversary, Chloe will officially make her debut into high society. It was a beautiful summer ball, so romantic everyone was completely thrilled. They were whispering, half joking, that His Majesty sent Madame Bring to Archduchess Chloe to mentor her. The ball was organized perfectly, but that's all Eleanor, and you gotta say the king was merciful to prevent a scandal. Finally, the hostess of this wonderful event has arrived. Her Highness, the Archduchess. The upper crust was all over her, meeting the Archduchess and showering her with compliments. Rumor had it her husband was so perfect, she faded in comparison. Maybe that's why he was ripped. Chloe heard praise and taunts that day, but she was too drained to really pay attention to it. First, she needed to eat. Even if she was just a temporary Archduchess, she'd at least enjoy the perks. She was so hungry she got way too into taste testing the food. Chloe hated the Archduke's snark. There was no rule against eating in the Archducal job description. While everyone pretended to listen, she seized the moment to share her thoughts with Curtis. She told him she hadn't expected married life to be any less hectic. And to keep those hopes from getting crushed, they needed to deal with the increased workload and zero time to eat. Hearing that, everyone called them a comedy duo. That's when Chloe turned to the guests and told them how Curtis used to hound her, even though the rumors had been swirling for ages and even leaked to the press. Even though the royal guard was known for being tough, it had at least one good thing going for it. They fed you well, and you could count on it. But now that she's an Archduchess, she doesn't even have time to eat, and that was just too much for her. She admitted that if it weren't for the ladies from the Eleanor Society, she'd be completely screwed. They supported her during the most chaotic time, helped her get through it, and now the ball's shaping up to be amazing. Looking at the ball, Chloe couldn't hold back her gratitude. This was the blessing of the great dragon Aya Benares and Gran Asadi. They were happy to help Her Highness out too, and Chloe liked their reaction. And now, to seal the deal on her successful image, all that's left is to listen to all these people. Now that she's the Archduchess and the hostess of the ball, there's no getting out of it. She has to pay attention to everyone in turn. Today, Chloe's gonna have to squeeze every last drop of charm out of herself for all these people. Count Oren was stoked to see them. Chloe knew him. He oversaw the Southern Mines, and this social small talk felt like forever. Curtis, all worried about his wife, offered to get her some fruit, even though Chloe thought he'd just been ragging on her for overeating. The kingdom was a total mess, and Chloe was stuck in an endless gabfest with the Archduke. Chloe was beat and starving, so she wasn't turning down anything, not sweet fruit, not cheese. She was at her limit. Finally, His Royal Majesty showed up, but he was with Duchess Glentriand. They were arm in arm, big smiles on their faces, looking all lovey-dovey.